All right. Hello. Okay, we're good. Okay. Yeah, like our previous tech lead was always like, people that you, well, this is a joke he got off of a comic, and he said, people that use Vim tend to save as much time as they waste mentioning that they use Vim. So anyway. So yes, my name is Reid Villeneuve. Villeneuve. You'll notice I just wrote Reid V on here, and that last name is the reason why. Villeneuve. Which, by the way, if I'm talking to you and you don't have a name tag on, please cover your area up here, because if I attempt to look at your name tag and it's not there, then I'll faint with a null pointer error. Okay, so just just do me a little favor there. Okay. So I haven't yet merged this presentation. Definitely come back to these. We put these things up here so that you guys can access them. The links that I have on here are clickable, so just come over here and click on them. That might save you from some note taking too. And also, probably don't look at my GitHub. It just has stuff when I was on coding boot camp, so it's not very interesting. All right. So as I was making the example program for this presentation, I found that the actual process you use to upgrading from AngularJS to Angular is actually not super technical per se. It's more about your planning on all the pre-planning you do, and reading up on the documentation and knowing what tools are available to you. So I mean, you'll see that when we actually get to the example program, there's actually very little code involved. It's just a line here and a line there. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So you'll just want to make sure that you understand your app now. Do you have a current build process? Is it gulp or grunt based? Do you use a module loader? If you already use one, that will help you a lot in the upgrade. The developer resources and business interest is always a huge consideration when it comes to upgrading, because honestly, for sometimes it can be a hard sell, depending on the scale of the app. I mean, that's a lot of developer resources, and you just really got to know, why do we want to do this as a business, and a lot of the times it involves, Angular being, faster for, users and all that. So you've all heard all this, of course. Just, I forgot that I did that. So I highly recommend TypeScript. It was designed around TypeScript. Dart is very syntactically similar. If you kind of compare them side by side, it seems like they put a lot of effort into making sure that they are visually parsable in the same way. And don't use DS5. I mean, you can. It's definitely possible. It's all compiled in DS5 right now. It's just there's no documentation for it. The Angular CLI offers some really good benefits. Including it in a pre-made project will take some extra steps. So you gotta, do you want to use Angular CLI, or you want to just use the Webpack bundle? When I first started this, I actually originally was going to use the Webpack bundle, and then after a while decided against it, and we'll get into that later. Consider if you want to use async await. If you have a really heavy promise-based architecture and you abstract your calls out to some sort of HTTP service, it's pretty easy to transition. You just convert all your Angular HTTP calls using the to promise method, and you're good to go. I highly recommend using observables. They are extremely powerful, though. I mean, if you haven't used them, then look them up. Do you want to gloat that you've upgraded? That's these are all some very, very important things you got to consider before you make your transition. Which, by the way, I'll be giving this thing, to multiple meetups. So if you want to keep hearing the same joke over and over and over again, just kind of come to my next meetups and you get to hear that glow joke. I don't remember what I. Okay, yeah. So when I say AngularJS components, I mean not directive. Not they have the Angular 1.5 introduced the component. It's very syntactically similar to the Angular components. They made that specifically to help that upgrade. Victor from Narwhal wrote a book on the upgrade, and in that he recommended actually, if you already have a bunch of directive and non-component components, then don't bother refactoring all those. You don't want to go through and refactor twice. He recommended just leave them as is, unless you really want to. So I'm just kind of forwarding that advice I read there. The AngularJS and Angular style guides were written by John Papa, both of them, and they're very, very similar. So if you Oh, well, anyway, I do reference them as AngularJS and Angular instead of Angular 1, Angular 2, because that's kind of the official way to do that. Is that okay with everybody, or would you prefer I use different? Okay, I saw a bunch of nods. Okay. So anyway, they're designed to be very, very similar. So again, that's just another thing that, you know, any new components you want to make right now, just start doing this. Start using components. Start, you know, following the AngularJS style guide. You know, that way, whenever you do make the transition, those new components are going to be just that much easier. And you know, I just kind of wanted to make a quick side by side so you can see what I mean. So you know, this is, you know, regular old, very complicated app that adds 1 plus 1. You know the kind of stuff we have to deal with, right? So yeah, I mean, we got our template and our bindings up here on top. In the project that Warner recently started putting the function right to blow it, because that tends to go along with how the it's weird how it highlights. How the decorator kind of interacts with the, well, is, I mean, placed right above the class in the in Angular 2. So yeah, just like I say, it just kind of offers those kinds of advantages. Also, you know, it'll allow you to do one-way bindings and all that out of the box a lot easier. So I found that the JavaScript Typescript was one of the hardest parts of this, and this is a joke that you've never heard before. You've never ever seen this happen. I'm going to convert this gulp file to TypeScript, okay? So, well, let's make that, and then to gulp file. There we go. All right, conversion complete. All right, like I said, come by the meetups and you'll get to hear that joke again. I know that you're just super excited about that, you know. Let's see. Anyway, so obviously that entire thing was just for that stupid joke. The complication of going from JavaScript to TypeScript is more about the build process involved with that. You know, the example project that I'll be demonstrating here will show you a way to get around that extremely easily, and I'll tell you the pros and cons about it. Anyway, and like I said, that's it was someone on Stack Overflow that I saw this. I don't remember who said it or anything, but if you don't know where to start, just mass convert everything to TypeScript. Just like you know, just convert all your TS to JS and just let them compile, and then you're like, okay, well, there's my TypeScript. I guess I just do a module load again. You know, that just kind of helps start that snowball rolling. You know. I guess I just talked about the module loader. Man, the Angular client, you know, the Angular CLI is awesome. It uses Webpack. I don't know, you know, Angular, they're designing components entirely around tree shaking. You know, I know that, for example, what is it? Yeah, RxJS actually. They're actually doing a major refactor of what. Actually, I don't think it might already be out of it. Anyway, of how they expose their components, because they're doing it in a more tree shake friendly way, and Webpack can just do that. You know, so if you want like smaller programs and, you know, smaller load times, then, well, you know, just use Webpack. So yeah, we're talking about ng upgrade here, because, you know, converting an app is a lengthy process, and you don't want to spend, you know, a year converting the app while the old app just sits there. You know, so I mean, this will allow you to do it in increments. You know, they use this terminology a lot in the documentation. So I'm just going to mention. So when they say upgrading, they don't necessarily mean making your AngularJS code now, you know, TypeScript and blah blah blah. This is kind of more. If you have an AngularJS component of some sort, there is a process you can use so it can be consumed by your Angular components and vice versa. So the upgrading AngularJS to Angular, and downgrade is Angular to AngularJS. So keep that in mind. I'll be using that terminology here too. So for make an Angular service and an AngularJS directive consumes it, that's downgrading the service so that AngularJS can use it. Oh yeah, I just put an example of that. So I believe I have. Oh, I put a little gotcha here. If you're doing AngularJS code, it's easy to forget to add your components to your declarations arrays of your module, because you're kind of thinking in AngularJS terms. So just make sure you do that. That's something that, I've seen more than one person kind of get stuck on that. So I have these here for people that view these slides later. We'll be going through the actual project, and we'll see it in a much better way. But anyway, the purpose here is, we have a regular role Angular class, and we can use a regular old AngularJS module syntax and just wrap it around this downgrade component call. That's all you gotta do. You're downgrading this component to an AngularJS component. That's it. That's how you do it. This actually will work with ahead of time compiling. It'll work with tree shaking. So it's very, very cool. So I don't know how many of you have been following our YouTube area a lot. One of the first thing I ever did was Jesse actually converting John Papa's Hot Towel project into Angular. So I figured that's actually a pretty good start. That's a good example program to use because, number one, it kind of already follows those coding standards because, like I said, they're very syntactically similar to how the official Angular standards are. Oh yeah, and I will put the timecode link here once this video is released. I'll come back and I'll actually keep modifying this stuff as time goes by. So visit whenever. You'll see more done with the example program. You'll see more in here. So I'm kind of using this where are we now and where do we want to be syntax here. But let's just give you a quick overview of what Hot Towel is. It's crashing. That's what it is. Oh, there we go. Okay. It's just a very simple template app. It has this was generated off of Yeoman. I didn't modify it at all. I did because I converted some of it to Angular. It is simple. It has this is retrieved via a backend API call that's also running locally. So is this number here 72. This is just a regular old router, and I think this has a mobile. A little mobile menu there, and so this is a very unique project in that it has a extremely where's my this is definitely what happens during live coding sessions. My cursor froze. Okay. Oh well. There we go. Okay, so anyway, as you can see, as you'll see in a moment here, the gulp file is extremely significant. This thing is giant. What is it? 704 lines of code. It has it watches your files, and it packages everything up, and it will live reload, and it's an excellent thing. It's just that this is more complication. This is the kind of complication you'll face when you are converting your AngularJS apps up, because this is a very AngularJS centric. Process. It's not necessarily AngularJS centric. It's just more that it takes the limitations of JavaScript and covers them for you. When we have tools such as the Angular CLI, this is a lot of code that can be eliminated, and you can do that on in a slow way. So there is a vet gulp task in here. I noticed I didn't notice. I've used this thing for a while. There was a vet gulp task in here which really won't be valid anymore because it uses JS hint, and we're compiling our JavaScript down, so JS hint really, you'll find, does not like compiled code. Isn't that weird? I just threw a to-do in here because this wasn't really relevant or Anyway, so you can get a gulp TS-lint adaptation, so you can throw it in there if you've got a big old gulp file like this and want to use it. So this right here is a decision that I put in here because in the official Angular upgrading from AngularJS, this is a really great reference. They've got little step-by-step things you can take here, and then they actually convert a little small app here called Phone Cat Tutorial. So definitely read through this page. Just reading through it once, you'll get a really good context and the kind of stuff you have to do. They do recommend. Oh, I'm sorry. On the Phone Cat tutorial, what they did is there we go. They just directly run TSC Watch. and they have it set up in such a way to where the JavaScript files are emitted as siblings to the TypeScript files. And this actually worked extremely well for this particular build process that we have here, because it grabs all the JavaScript files and automatically injects their references as script tags and index.html. It's a good gulp file. And I realized if I use this same process, then I don't have to do anything to the gulp file, nothing, because they're just directly converted to JavaScript. So it just already handled that, And man, I worked on a Webpack version of this with the intention of eventually bringing it to the Angular CLI. I've so wanted to have that done for you guys. It's in too early of a stage to show it. So keep your eyes on the repo. It'll get there. Unfortunately, I used a lot of time on it, so I didn't get as much done as I wanted to with the actual example program. Oh, and this was cool. So one thing I noticed too going through here is that there's actually a pretty good amount of abstraction in common pain points, as I wrote there. You'll find that things like routers and things that touch many parts of the app can be difficult if you wrote your app with really good abstraction. So like, for example, if you have a service, like one service that makes all of your HTTP calls, maybe you have other services that use it, then you don't have to adapt your, the observable HTTP with much effort at all. You just put one, to promise in your entire code base and everything works. So, look out for the kinds of abstractions you have and maybe consider refactoring new ones, because again, that'll help you a lot. If there's a significant API change between an Angular service and an AngularJS service, abstractions are great, and and I just kind of threw this on here. This was my goal here. I wanted to follow these guidelines right here as much as possible, so that way if you would like to take these steps yourself, this repo here can act as a very good guide for the little gotchas, because there are a lot of gotchas. If you follow this word for word, there are certain things that aren't exactly right on here. I'll point them out as we get to them. Oh boy, I spent about 6 hours on one little issue, and the problem was one word, and I didn't say. Oh my god, it was terrible. So I'll mention that as we get to this here. Oh, and of course, obviously, we want to gloat that we upgraded. Obviously, that's a very important decision. All right, so look at this. So we'll just go ahead and go to the this is sort of the in progress upgrade. I stopped here because this is actually really good. Because if I just showed you a fully Angular code base, what good would that do you? So I converted just a few things just to kind of get the point across about what we're doing here. And all right, so let's see. I was kind of originally thinking of maybe diffing this so I can kind of explain the changes a little better. It's just kind of something that really dry, so I'm just not going to do that. So the data service was a AngularJS service that I converted to a regular Angular TypeScript. As you remember from the snippet we saw before, this is just standard Angular stuff. Our injectables, observables. Actually, I believe I have the original repo. No, I don't have it up. Oh well. So yeah, when I converted this from its Angular, actually, why don't I just do this? This shouldn't cause a problem. Let's just grab our initial commit here and just skipping. Yeah, that was right before I upgraded the data. So yeah, let's just use this one. Oh, because it's the JS. Okay, so here. Oh, well, this is a compiled version. I didn't pull far enough back. Well, we'll just say never mind on that. We'll just go back to where we were a moment ago. Okay. I guess nothing. It's not super interesting anyway. This was just a regular old Angular service, which was a factory, I guess, which was I've got core data service. It passed in just like a really simple function that just had these two endpoints on it. I noticed that HTTP. This is actually the Angular HTTP service, so this is returning unobservable. So if your app is small enough to where you don't have to turn everything into a promise, unless you want to use async await, I would say just use observables, man. Like I highly recommend just getting into them now. So you'll notice that when I did this upgrade, I didn't put any to promise things on here. I just updated the receiving or the consuming entities. So make that decision. I feel like in a long run is if you can do that, it's definitely worth the observable. So yeah, like I said, just like before, this is just a regular old Angular component wrapped in a downgrade injectable, which is out of this package here. This is the ng upgrade package. The receiving entity is, I believe, the dashboard. What is that? The controller? Yeah. So yeah, obviously this is very AngularJS. This was the it's weird that there's both an inject and a ng-inject annotation. This is the standard for the time, and when we use the data service, we just use it. I don't have to call anything special on the consuming entity side. When you export it using downgrade injectable, then it comes in through here just like any other Angular injectable. So it's very quick, very easy. So this is what I mean by, from a coding technical standpoint, this isn't that difficult. You'll find most of your problems come in the more build process side. Boy. And I believe the other thing I did was the, let's see, it was the sidebar. So it was the HT sidebar component. And you'll notice this naming convention that I've adapted. I use .ngjs.ts for the AngularJS components and just regular old .ts with the Angular. For this particular project, that works very well because the gulp file looks for, files using matchers, right? And if all I have to do is make it look for the ngjs.ts files and ignore the just ts files. Again, it made that really easy because now the TypeScript files are outside of that build process. Oops, I'm actually open it. So this, again, just like last time, this was a AngularJS directive, and I've converted it into an Angular component. I chose this specific one because it was a little more challenging than just that service. We have to call one thing. If we were to go into here, I'll kind of show you what this is precisely. It's just this. That's all it is. This content is I'm forgetting a word here. Projected into this ng content tag. So this is just like using a transclude in AngularJS. I found that it tended to just work out of the box. You just provide it with ng content and it'll just go. Man, so it'd be nice if I had an example of the old ones. And that's I'm thinking I might do. Yeah, let's just look at the diff. That'll be a quick way to do it. I'll get back to this stuff in just a moment. This was a lesson learned there. So getting into our sidebar. Yeah, that's right. Okay. This used jQuery heavily. If you do use jQuery, obviously Angular doesn't really have. It doesn't include JQLite or anything like that. So these things I kind of just had to use regular JavaScript syntax. So if you have a chosen library, just keep that in mind. Double check to see if your code uses a lot of jQuery or JQLite references, because that could be a pain point. So it's just something you got to plan for. this is it's kind of one-to-one to here. We don't have this little slide down animation anymore. I chose just to make it appear there. Just consider that this isn't a very Angular way of doing things. So whether you want to just make these quick conversions and then you come back later and do it, or actually do a real Angular conversion, where this may be a separate component, where that has its own functionality, that would probably be preferable in the long run. So just keep that in mind if you're using this repo as an example later. And yeah, I think this. Well, the consuming entity would just, you can see on the template, it's exactly the same. It's literally exactly the same. There's not really a whole lot to show you there. So, a little piece of advice: when you are reading this documentation, make sure that you are using the version that is. There we go. Make sure you have your version correct here, because I was accidentally on Angular 4 reading the Angular 5 documentation, and the way they have the let's see, I believe I have it AngularJS from Angular code. The way they have it here in the example will not work if you do it word for word if you're on an older version of Angular. So again, just make extra sure that you have your ducks in a row there. The specific thing was I was using component here instead of directive, and it was a very, 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 very cryptic error message. So yeah, just a little thing there. Anyway, I feel that's probably so again, so that was one of those gotchas, I mean, like, the only way I feel that you could really get familiar with this process is just make a little small program, use one that you'd find on the internet, maybe a to-do app or this, and just do it, and you'll kind of get to learn those little gotchas, because, like, while I remembered some of them and I spoke them out here, like, there's like a lot of them that you will recognize as you go through. So, have members on your team and you yourself just kind of just do a little upgrade like this. I just convert two things, and then at that point you'll have a pretty good idea. Oh, okay, I kind of get what the workflow is here. So the guide uses the Angular Quick Start project as the way to sort of create your Angular, boilerplate, I guess. And nowhere in there does it mention that you have to actually download the system.js Angular loader.js file and put it in your root. Again, that's another one of those things where it's like, if you don't do that, it'll give you an extremely cryptic error message. Very, very cryptic. Yeah. So yeah, that was just a little thing that I just kind of documented, because that was another thing that kind of trapped me for a little while, was just figuring out that you have to put that there. I know that the guide provide tsconfig requires tweaking, and that was more because I don't really use TypeScript a whole lot. So I'm sure someone who has had more experience with it will have a much easier time discovering that stuff than I did. This book here, this Narwhal Upgrading Angular Applications book, is 30 pages long, and it has so much info that it's absolutely astounding. It's like, I think it's like $20 right now, and it's really, really worth the cost, especially if you're going to do a very large scale upgrade. He kind of gives some extremely good tips on how to accomplish that. For example, one thing I didn't go over on this that he did go over is you can do little tricks where if your app can allow for this, you can do your upgrades on a route-by-route basis. What I just showed you is what he called, like my example program that I showed you, he called it horizontal slicing. They at Angular Mix, they called it ng upgrade light, because, well, I apologize, vertical slicing is ng upgrade light. Because if you click on a route and the only thing that loads up is Angular components, you click on another route and it's Angular components only, and then you click on a third route, that's AngularJS. You don't have to load up the AngularJS library at all until you click on that third route. So you can actually save yourself a lot of memory usage by doing a route at a time. Again, that might take a while though for each route. So that's a business decision or an architectural decision that you got to make. So those kinds of tips, those little high level specifics are there's packed full in that book, and again, the official Angular upgrade guide, it's very good. This thing was created fully off of that guide. He offers good tips on the upgrading Angular, just since not everyone has that book, and anyone can access this. That's why I chose to kind of mostly focus on using the official Angular upgrade guide when I made this example program. And they do have a blog post based on the, I just totally did that. They have a blog post based on a lot of the concepts that he goes through, possibly including horizontal and vertical slicing. And remember, so if you look at it, that's the terminology, horizontal vertical slicing. I don't see his little, I don't see him on here just with that quick thing, so, oh well, buy the book for that. Buy the book anyway, it's quite excellent, and Victor is a very knowledgeable person. So one thing occurred to me too. So I mentioned earlier that there are pros and cons to using that TypeScript emitter. So let me tell you, like, you can configure your editor to only show, there's no TTS files, so to only show files that are in your source control. If I hit JS, you're not going to see all the emitted, files. However, if I were to go into, let's just say, like, if you're browsing from here, then this is really, really hard to visually parse. You've got your JS, your JS maps, TS, JS, JS map, TS, So if you can use like a bundle, like Webpack bundle, then probably just go ahead and do it. In this case, I ended up landing on here because, again, the sculpt file was already so integrated, and it was modifying it tends to kind of snowball. This ended up actually being the correct choice for me, especially considering my fuzzy finder doesn't include those, So just keep that in mind. There are just like that's a important thing to consider. So let's see. So does anyone have any questions on kind of what I had mentioned? Because I know I was a little bouncy around there. We'll start with. You had Green, raise your hand first, and then Matt, your second,
So when you say you have two different, there's a file and there's a file, and you load both of those in HTML, and then you select it, and then you set that file out. So what's the approach differently by just adding it onto the home page, or adding it onto the project, or by route?
So loading things asynchronously in AngularJS, I highly recommend looking up the documentation on that. Basically, I guess the idea behind it is when you first load your page, only load your Angular. Like, for example, do your home page in Angular. Do not load AngularJS and do not load Angular Upgrade. Only when they click on a route where there are AngularJS components, then you can asynchronously load up those libraries. The longer that you continue upgrading your project, the less and less, the fewer and fewer people will actually have to deal with loading those two libraries.
So would that be more the synchronous part to load the AngularJS before you load the page and then resolve the route or something like that? You can inject the AngularJS and resolve, and then load the codes. Because if you have something on there, you're doing async and AngularJS.
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. Yeah, if it turns out that pause where it does have to, download and then load those components causes a big user interface nightmare, then I recommend just doing it component by component. If your app is built in such a way to where that kind of pause doesn't really matter, if it's like a brochure page or something, then that may be the way to go, especially if your team is big enough to kind of get through those routes quickly. And you had a question too, Matt?
Yeah. So like in this example here, you use the downgrade component call. So this Angular one can be used with AngularJS. If you have a component that you want to use with both Angular and AngularJS for some reason,
some HTTP service or something.
So this allows you to inject it via Angular. Otherwise, we just export the class like normal. So if you do an import on it, then you get the Angular component.
Okay. Cool.
Did I mix AngularJS and Angular while I was talking? By the way, I was afraid that I'd be doing that the entire time.
Seemed right.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. Were there any other questions? Would anyone like me to kind of go a little more over the example app, or is this pretty much good at this point? All right, yeah, make sure you check it out. I'll be upgrading I'll be constantly updating the example app. So just keep looking at it, and I'm going to put a new commit for every single file that I update. So you can kind of see the step-by-step process and how I did over the long term. So.